Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Joy Everlasting. I'm glad you are able to check me out. If you want, you can subscribe and hit the notification so when I upload a video, you'll be able to be notified. So today I want to talk about the Shunammite woman. A lot of people don't know who she is, but I think she's pretty cool. And she had awesome faith that pleased God, faith that got God's attention. And in the book of Hebrews chapter 11, it's known as the faith chapter. But Hebrews chapter 11 verse 6, it talks about without faith, it's impossible to please God. And we have to believe that he exists, and he rewards those who diligently seek him, and he rewards us. And you think about it like, man, not only do we trust you, you give us a reward on top of that. That's so cool, God. You're like wonderful. And when you read the word of God, you are able to have access to the promises of God and are able to hold God when you're praying and talking to him. You're like, Jesus, hello, I am trusting you for everything. And that's what this woman did. But before she even activated her faith, she was just available. She was available, and she gave what she had unto God. She was a wealthy woman, and you read her story in 2 Kings chapter 4, and it goes on from verse 8 through 37, and then it picks up again in chapter 8, chapter 8, verse 1 through 6. And the cool thing about this story is, like, unless you're like reading the Bible consistently, you won't really like catch her story, because it kind of like pauses and then all kinds of stuff happen and then it picks up again. But when you're reading it, you're like, oh my God, that's the same lady. And you go back to the story. But this is a time where Elijah, the prophet, went up to heaven in the chariots of fire. And Elisha, he is now the successor, and he's now the prophet of the land. And he has his servant Gehazi. And I want to just pick up the story in 2 Kings chapter 4. Verse 8, it says, one day Elijah went to the town of Shunammite, and a wealthy woman lived there. Doesn't even give her name. It just says that she's wealthy. She's married, obviously. You'll read that in the next verse. And it says, and she urged him to come to her home for a meal. And after that, whenever he passed by that way, he would stop there for something to eat. So this woman, she not only had faith, but she took care of the man of God. She took care of him. And it's so cool because in Jesus's day, when he sends out his 12 apostles, this is like on a side note, he sends out his apostles and he's like, I'm sending you amongst the wolves and they're going to hurt you. But at the end of chapter 10, he says that those who welcome the prophet will receive the reward of the prophet for welcoming him. And I feel like this woman of God received a reward from God. I'm going to just keep reading. Just follow me. So it says that in verse 9, 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 9, it says, she said to her husband, I am sure this man who stops in from time to time is a holy man of God. Let's build a small room for him on the roof and furnish it with a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp. Then he will have a place to stay whenever he comes by. So now she's not only feeding him, welcoming him into her home, she's now building a room for him. And she puts everything in there. I think of like a hotel that has a bed, it has a lamp, it has a chair. And she literally goes above and beyond. And I think of the time, Jesus hadn't even came in human form, and she's already opening up her house to the man of God, which is so cool. And to know that this very room is the blessing that God has for her. Stay with me here. I'm going somewhere. It's so cool. So she builds the room, and they actually stop by and stay at her house from time to time. And the man of God says to his servant Gehazi, I want to bless this woman. I really want to bless her. And she tells the man of God, hey, my family takes care of me, because he's like, I'll even put a good word for you with the king. And she's like, no. And the Gehazi tells him another time that they go stay by, she doesn't have a son. Her and her husband are getting pretty old. They don't have a son. So what's cool is that in verse 13, Elijah says Tell her, we appreciate the kind concern that you have shown us. What can we do for you? Can we put in a good word for you with the king or to the commander of the army? No, she replied. My family takes good care of me. Later, Elijah asked Gehazi, what can we do for her? And that's what happens when you begin to open up your house and begin to give to the man of God and support, the people of God. All of a sudden, God just wants to bless you. And you're like, oh my God. And this is just the beginning portion of it. And he said to her, what can we do for you? And he says, she doesn't have a son. Her and her husband is an old man. Call her back here, Elijah told him. And the woman returned, and Elijah said to her as she stood in the doorway. Verse 6, he says, next year at this time, you will be holding a son in your arms. And then she's like, no. Like, I don't even want anything. She's like, oh, man of God, don't deceive me and get my hopes up like that. But sure enough, it goes on to say that she had a son the next year. And trip out on this. Like, the cool thing is that's not where the blessing stops. Because many times we get blessed with things, but God is asking us to give up the blessing again, to surrender it. Are you going to trust me as you did in the beginning when you didn't have it? And her son dies. He's out in the field working with her husband, and he's getting sick. And the dad's like, send the son back to the mom and send him back to the house because he's not like doing good right here. He's not even putting in work. And he's just sick. The dad just thinks he's sick. But the mom takes him into the house and the son dies. I'm like, oh my God. Can you believe that sense? Like, I never asked for this and here you give it to me and now you take it away. Like, what's going on? And your faith in life can be challenged and threatened. But like this woman, she is just so cool. She puts the little boy in the room that she made for the man of God and just tells her servant, like, let's go. We need to go to the mountain where the man of God is, and let's go. And he's like right now? And she's like, right now. He's like, is everything okay? And she's like, it's okay. And I just think it's so cool because in verse 23, she says, the servant's like, why go today? He asked. It's neither moon or festival or Sabbath, but she said, it will be all right. Like, she knew that God was going to do something. She knew within her heart. This is like supernatural faith that gets God's attention. She knew that God was going to do something. And she saddled her donkey. She went over there. Then Gehazi comes out and is like, what can I do for you? She's like, nothing. I need to talk to the man of God. Is everything okay? She's like, everything's fine. And you're talking about having such confidence in God. I mean, this woman submerged herself in the presence of God. And finally, when the man of God came out, long story short, she tells him, I need you to come to my house. And Gehazi gets there first. And she's like, he goes to the room and is like, the kid's dead. I prayed for him. The kid's dead. So by the time Elisha comes, he shuts the door. And it reminds me of when Jesus talks about in the Sermon Mount, he says that when you go and pray to the Lord, pray in secret, for your Father rewards you the things that you do in secret. And he shuts the door and he lays on top of the boy and nothing happens. And then he starts praying again and he lays on top of the boy again and he starts sneezing like 7 times. Then he comes back to life. He was raised from the dead. He brings him downstairs to the mom and all is well. That's all you hear about that story. Then you don't hear nothing about her. You just think like, oh man, that's cool. She didn't ask for a blessing and then God hooked her up. But years later in chapter 8, this is like super cool. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I'm trying to do it really quickly. In chapter 8, the story picks up, and this time Elijah told the woman whose son he had brought back to life, take your family and move some other place, for the Lord has called for a famine of Israel, and it will last for 7 years. So the woman did as the man of God instructed, and she took her family and settled in the land of Philistines for 7 years. So here, years later, she's still open. She's still obedient. She still has faith to trust that God is going to take care of her and her family. And she moves to the land of the enemy, And the crazy part about this is that Gehazi, the servant of Elijah, was in the king's palace. And 7 years later, the king is asking, this is just like, you got to follow me here. Here the king, 7 years later, a famine. This woman literally leaves town because the man of God asked her to. So she didn't even have to suffer during that time. And here, 7 years later, she wants to come back and ask the king for her land back. And simultaneously to this, Gehazi is in the king's presence, and the king is asking him, tell me some of the stories. Tell me some of the stories that you had with the man of God, you know? And so Gehazi is like, there was this one time where Elijah raised this kid from the dead, you know? And at that moment was when the 7 years had ended from the famine, and the woman from Shunammite was coming in to plead her case. And the crazy thing, Gehazi is like, that's her. That's the woman I'm telling you about. It's so cool. And in verse in chapter 8, verse 5, Gehazi was telling the king about the time Elijah had brought the boy back to life. And at that very moment, the mother of the boy walked in to make her appeal to the king about her house and her land. Look, my lord, Gehazi exclaimed, here is the woman now. And this is her son, the very one Elijah brought back to life. In verse 6, is this true? The king asked her, and she told him the story. So he directed one of his officials to see that everything that she had lost was restored to her, including the value of any crops that had been harvested during her absence. So she not only got her land back, but she got money. And she wouldn't even have been making anything because there was a famine. And I just think, like, this is faith that pleases God. He rewards those who that diligently seek him. And just like how it happened with the woman in Shunammite in the Old Testament, he is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. And for you and me who are willing to open up our house to the man of God, the woman of God, we receive that reward. And not only that, we began to receive the double reward for seeking him diligently, for having that faith, pleasing God, because without faith, it is impossible to please God. And imagine that you're doing what God has. I mean, God just wants to just shower us with his love. But in that midst, in that time, like when she lost her son, it was what she did that was important. It was what she did. She didn't tell nobody. She anchored herself. She anchored herself in God, and she went to the man of God. She trusted and believed that everything was going to be okay. And you're talking about getting the King of Glory, heaven on, is his throne. The earth is his footstool. You're getting his attention. So I hope you're encouraged with that. And I just hope that you would be challenged to read. That's in 2 Kings chapter 4 in verse 8 all the way to, I believe, 37. And then also in chapter 8 in the beginning, first 8 verses. But read it on your own and just see how God ministers to you. And I just hope that you come back to my channel and subscribe. And I just want to leave you with this is say no to sin and never say no to Jesus. I hope you guys are blessed. Have a good day.